These have gotten really popular in the past few years, haven't they? Prices of older point-and-shoot digital cameras have skyrocketed on secondhand marketplaces in the past few years, helped along by internet trends and growing Y2K nostalgia. And I get it. I love these cameras too. They're a lot of fun to use. Yes, the images they produce are not nearly as good as what you can get on even an older smartphone, but there's something about the quality of the images that people, especially in my generation, can't help but love. I could talk forever about the shortening cycles of nostalgia and the way that social media and computational photography has resulted in cultural pushback against the perfect looking images that we so often share online, but this isn't the video for that. Sort of. No, today I want to talk about a digital camera that's a lot older than that one. This is the Fujifilm MX700, all the way from the 20th century, first released in 1998. But first, a sort of brief history of the digital camera. A really common piece of internet trivia is that Steve Sasson actually invented the digital camera when he was working at Kodak back in the 70s, but the company kept it a secret so they could keep selling film. Like many internet facts, this is technically true, but an enormous simplification. People had been researching methods of recording and storing digital images for decades before Sasson joined the Eastman Kodak Company in 1973. And by the time he built his camera in 1975, multiple successful attempts had already been made at capturing and storing digital images, just on devices we wouldn't really consider to be cameras. In fact, there was even a commercial digital camera available for purchase back in 1975, the Chromemco Cyclops, as seen in that year's issue of Popular Electronics. That being said, it was an incredibly niche enthusiast device that took images so tiny, 32 by 32 pixels, you could barely tell what was being captured. By the time he built his camera at Kodak, all the parts required to make a self-contained digital camera were already commercially available. And to his credit, Sasson has been very open about the fact that he, and I quote from his BBC interview, basically stole all the parts. To be clear, none of this is meant to take away from Sasson's accomplishment. His camera was really cool and was only possible because of how much money companies were willing to spend on R&D projects that may or may not pay off back in the 60s and 70s. So the digital camera has been around for a very long time, but they didn't truly make their way into the hands of consumers until the 1990s, and even then they weren't very popular. The Canon RC701 from 1986 is sometimes cited as the first ever consumer digital camera, but it wasn't a true digital camera. It didn't store any of its information digitally, instead storing analog scan lines onto a floppy disk, which is also why it's referred to by pedants as a still video camera and not a digital camera. On top of that, it cost $2,458 in 1986, which is $7,289.09 today, which you'd have to pay with a dime because they stopped making the penny this past November. The first truly digital camera to be sold to consumers was the Dicam Model 1, released in the year 1990, which looks freaking awesome, to say the least. Seriously, look at this thing. You'd feel like James Bond holding this thing. I would feel like James Bond holding this thing today. Of course, there were small film cameras back then, 110 cameras and the like, but there were no cameras that looked and worked like this. It also took absolutely dreadful photos. 376 by 240 pixels, which is a big step up from the 32 by 32 the Chromemco Cyclops took in 1975, but still absolutely terrible, especially when compared to film photos from the day. It also only shot in black and white and communicated to the user via a series of beeps that you would have to learn from a manual that came in the box. But that wasn't really the point of this device. The point of this device was that it was magic. You could take the photos, then put them onto your computer in your house, something that had really only become a thing 10 years prior, and then look at them immediately. And you'd better look at them immediately, because if the battery died before you took the images off the camera, the volatile internal flash storage would blow them up and you would never be able to see them again. But still, no darkroom, no chemicals, no taking it to the store and waiting to have them printed. You could just have them and print them at home once you resize them to fit onto regular photo paper. Unfortunately for Dicam, the camera did not sell very well. Part of it was price. While it was much more affordable than the RC701, it still cost $995 in 1990, equivalent to almost $2,500 today. But more importantly, film technology had gotten really, really good and really cheap. Obviously, I never got to experience it, but back in the day, Kodak really embodied their slogan, "You push the button and we'll do the rest." You could shoot Kodak film, sometimes even on a Kodak camera, then have the film developed by Kodak with their special Kodak processes, and then printed at a Kodak print shop on Kodak printer paper. For the majority of consumers interested in photography, there just wasn't much of a reason to buy a camera like the Dicam. Unfortunately for Kodak, digital cameras got really good really fast, and just 9 years after Fujifilm released their first digital camera, they released this one in 1998, the MX700. Quick pause, because you'll notice that I said they released the MX700 in 1998, 9 years after their first digital camera, which astute viewers will notice that would mean that they released their first digital camera in 1989, 1 year before the Dicam Model 1. While it's true that Fujifilm released a consumer digital camera in 1989, I literally could not find any information about where it was sold online, and the Digital Camera Museum, an online wiki for digital cameras, says, and I quote, "There's a lot of crap on the internet about the DS1P, an even earlier digital camera, and the DSX. Thousands of websites claim that these were marketed and sold, whereas we know that the DS1P was never marketed, and it is up until now entirely uncertain whether the DSX was marketed or not. So if you come across a book, magazine, or website that claims that these cameras were marketed, please think twice." There are a couple photos of it on the Digital Camera Museum website, so it does appear that this camera did exist at some point. The wiki also claims that it cost $20,000 US on release, $52,277 today. Personally, I literally could not find any source online confirming that anyone actually bought it. Possibly because it cost almost as much as American college tuition costs today back in 1989. So I don't really consider it to be the first consumer digital camera because it doesn't appear that any consumers actually bought it. Maybe 10 years from now, they'll find one in the closet of a Japanese railroad billionaire, and I'll have to change this segment. Anyways, on to the next part of the video. I got this camera from my grandmother, who had a lifelong interest in photography, and bought this particular device on August 7th, 1998. I know this because, incredibly, the original warranty card is still in the box, taped to the back of this very, very detailed owner's manual, which includes things like an explanation of what a JPEG is, this very, very detailed explanation on how to delete images, as well as this flowchart showing you how to use the camera in normal mode. I mean, user manuals were just more detailed back in the day because consumer tech products were more diverse in general, but it's also very possible that this would be the first digital camera a lot of its users would have ever used. And so the concept of being able to immediately view and delete images would be rather new, even if the idea of navigating GUIs and digital file systems probably wouldn't have been. The box very proudly advertises a massive 1.5 megapixel resolution, which was a big step up from the Dynacam. Editor James here. I accidentally call it the Dynacam here. It is meant to be Dicam, and I'm pretty sure I make the same mistake later in the video too. Just to set the record straight, it is Dicam, not Dynacam. 0.09 megapixels from just 8 years earlier. The box also notes that it's compact and lightweight, which is very true given that almost all handheld cameras in this era use banks of 4 to 6 AA batteries, while this one used a highly innovative, removable lithium-ion battery cell. This one in particular holds 1,350 milliamp hours of charge. I will also say, this note about the high-grade aluminum alloy body is very true. The camera feels really good to hold in the hands, even as it creeps closer to being 30 years old. All of the buttons and the menu wheel have held up really, really well, and even the flash and the LCD screen both work with only a few lines of dead pixels down one side. This really goes to show how consumer electronics just used to be built to last. One of my housemates pointed out that this camera has survived much longer than the generation of technology that it originally belonged to. The memory format this camera uses, and most of the technology that this camera once interfaced with is no longer manufactured or used outside of hobbyist settings. This really is a relic of an early digital age. You'll notice that the box also advertises its built-in flash and autofocus. To address this last point, and sorry in advance to anyone watching this that may be much older than digital cameras, but it's worth mentioning for the younger audience that autofocus actually predates digital cameras by more than 10 years. For example, this Minolta Maxim 7000, first released in 1985, includes both autofocus and automatic film advance, the first camera to ever come with both. This Nikon 8008S also has autofocus, and this one actually works, so you can see it in action. I personally found the idea that autofocus would be so much older than digital cameras to be a little counterintuitive, but I was also born after Y2K and the onset of the digital age, so really I have no lived context for these things. I expected autofocus to require microchips, but the funny thing is, I've been told by people with experience in machine vision that software-based autofocus is pretty terrible, even today. The box originally included the camera, a smart media card, more on that later, a charger, the battery, a video cable, the hand strap, a serial cable for PC, a serial cable for Mac, data transfer software, drivers, and Photo Deluxe by Adobe Systems Incorporated. This was the predecessor to Photoshop and at the time cost $49. No subscription needed. What an era. Of these items, the only ones I have with me are the camera, the battery, the hand strap, and the serial cable. Which is a shame because I do have an early 2000s PC rig that I would have loved to try the software on, but now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe it's a good thing I don't have the software discs, given that the early 2000s PC is currently disassembled on top of the shelf collecting dust, and I poached the case for my media machine. Maybe one day. Let's talk storage. I may have been born after Y2K, but I do remember the consumer electronics format wars from childhood. The memory card wars in particular were absolutely insane in the late 90s and early 2000s, and the entire thing really deserves a video of its own one day. In the year 1998 alone, Sony's memory stick, Intel's mini card, SanDisk's multimedia card, SanDisk's compact flash card, and of course, Toshiba's smart media card were all being actively manufactured and fighting for market share. Even more ridiculous is just 1 year later, we'd get two new, highly competitive memory cards, the SD card, yeah, that's the one that you're thinking of, and IBM's microdrive. This camera in particular uses a smart media card, also known as a solid-state floppy. These cards were pretty common in digital cameras from this era, but they never really took off like some of the other formats of the time, like the SD card and arguably the memory stick. But that being said, SM cards were incredibly thin for the day, and they're still really thin. I mean, look at this thing. It's thinner than a flat Pringle. This is due in part to the fact that this metal part is the entire chip. That's it. That's the whole NAND. The rest is just regular plastic. Like many memory cards, it features physical write protection in the form of a write protect sticker that could be adhered to this circle that would prevent any device from changing the data on it. I don't have any of the metallic write protect stickers that these cards originally came with, but I wouldn't want to write protect any of these cards anyways because of how small their capacities are. I have to imagine that the write protection on these cards was mostly used when they were used in conjunction with a PC anyways, and that's right, these cards were originally marketed as floppy disk replacements, hence the name solid-state floppy, and they could even be read by a regular floppy disk drive when used with a floppy disk adapter. One day I would love to test this feature, but as of now, I don't own a floppy drive capable of connecting with any of my computers, and that era of PC technology is frankly before my time and out of my wheelhouse. One of the problems with digital cameras in the late 90s and early 2000s was that digital storage was really low capacity, and SM cards were no exception. This card only holds 8 megabytes, and that translates to 12 whole images at fine, which admittedly is the highest quality. That's a third less than your standard roll of film. They did make cards up to 128 megabytes, which in theory would let you store 192 fine images, but I only have a few SM cards and all of them are 8 megabytes. The camera itself shares a remarkable number of design features with the one from the beginning of the video, which makes sense because all cameras share a remarkable number of design features, because they've been around for more than 100 years. We have the design of these things pretty locked down. The front of the camera features the flash sensor, a rangefinder, and a self-timer light, and this rubberized grip that is yet to turn back into goo. On the side, we have a smart media slot, the DC 5-volt power input, what I believe is composite video out, as well as digital out, which would let you hook it up to a PC. The bottom includes a lithium-ion battery bay, which warns you very sternly to absolutely not open it, which is strange because it's obviously designed to be opened by the average user. We also have the tripod mount, which I imagine would be primarily used in self-timer mode because, as far as I know, there's no way to remotely trigger the shutter on this camera. There's also this brightness wheel for the rear LCD display. On the back, we have the viewfinder, a status light, the mode wheel, which contains arrow keys in the center, each of which is also a light. The arrow keys will blink in a circular pattern whenever the camera is processing to let you know that it's thinking. Below, we have the select, display, and menu buttons, as well as the power switch. One of the really cool features this camera has is a programmable select button. Yeah, this isn't an OK button that you'd use to select settings. Let's plug it in and take a look. By setting what you want this button to do in the options, you can have it toggle between image quality, image size, and black and white. Unfortunately, until I buy a replacement battery for this camera, the feature resets every time the camera loses power. Either there's a dead button battery on the inside of the camera, or the volatile memory it stores settings in relies on the lithium battery being charged to save the presets. Nonetheless, consider that the iPhone got its first programmable button just last year. The 2-inch LCD is right below the buttons, and there's another rubber grip to the right of the display. There's another display on the top of the device. This shows when the red eye reduction is on, what the flash mode is set to, macro mode, the battery status, black and white mode, the smart media icon, the file size, and the image quality, as well as the number of shots that you have remaining very prominently right here. The two buttons next to the top screen allow you to change the flash mode between auto, obligate, and no flash, and allows you to toggle between normal shooting and macro shooting modes. To the right, we have the shutter, which works completely identically to modern point-and-shoot shutters, to press it halfway to focus, and all the way to take the shot. I found the layout of this camera to be incredibly ergonomic and easy to use with one hand, even for someone with pretty big hands like myself. The mode wheel and buttons are positioned in a way that's very easy to reach with your thumb, and the rubber grips offer this comforting sense of security when it's being held, even when shooting in portrait mode. It's worth mentioning that the camera shoots landscape images when it's held upright like this, and portrait images when it's held on its side like this. I did occasionally find myself covering the flash with my finger, but this raised edge and the glossy texture of the flash make it pretty obvious when you're doing so, and it didn't take long for me to get used to holding it in a way where I wouldn't block the flash. In addition, I love where the designers chose to put the status light. This way, when you're looking through the viewfinder, the status light is always in your peripheral vision, making it very easy to know when the camera is ready to take the next shot, without having to take your face away from the camera. This lets you line up the next shot in a few seconds before the camera processes the previous image and primes the flash, and you can take the next shot the moment the camera lets you know that it's ready. Image processing and saving takes 8 to 9 seconds on average, but from what I've read online, that's actually really quick from a camera of this era. The Digital Camera Museum says that this is due to the dual CPUs this camera employs for processing. However, in all my research, I couldn't confirm the technical specs of this device, and as of right now, I'm a little hesitant to take it apart. I hate to break it when there's still a lot of places I want to take it, so I'm just going to take the DKM's word for it. Okay, I've talked forever about the specs and the layout and the features of this camera, but what's it actually like to shoot with? The old CCD sensor imparts a delectable fuzziness that feels incredibly nostalgic. Quick pause. This video originally had a really lengthy section explaining the differences between CCD cameras and CMOS cameras, which is what almost all consumer cameras are these days, but it was getting too long and too technical. Really, what's important to know about CCD cameras is that they're older technology that's not really used in consumer cameras these days, and CMOS sensors have been the standard for more than 10 years. Resume. The resolution of these photos is impressively high, but the same can't be said for dynamic range. A lot of photos, especially those taken in bright settings, look incredibly flat, and the camera struggles to take pictures in the dark if there's anything brighter than the flash in frame. Like all CCD cameras from the era, this one is prone to vertical smearing when the light isn't even, and the digital noise is pretty noticeable when you zoom into dark parts of images. However, these weaknesses can be made up for quite a bit when shooting the camera's native black and white mode, especially for dynamic range and noise. I actually really like the black and white images this camera takes, but weirdly enough, the black and white images the camera produces are the same file size as color ones, so I'm still limited to 12 pictures per 8MB SM card. I don't know very much about information science or how digital stuff gets stored, but I was under the impression that black and white images are generally smaller because there's just less visual information in them. Another quirk of this camera is that I genuinely could not tell the difference between the different image qualities. Basic, normal, and fine images all kind of look the same. Like, just look at these pictures I took in downtown La Jolla. Can you tell the difference between these three? I thought maybe part of it had to do with the fact that they weren't taken with a tripod, so once I got home I set one up and took some pictures of static subjects. Despite there being a significant difference in file size, like the basic image is 4.5 times smaller than the fine one, there's definitely not a 4x quality jump between them. If you look closer, you can kind of tell there's a difference in the arm here, and there's some noise around the bag. Once you zoom in even further, I feel like you can kind of tell. There's slightly less detail on the head and the face on the basic one, but yeah, when you're zoomed in this far, every image this camera takes is going to look terrible because it's just a pixelated mess. After looking at these, I kind of regret not shooting in basic mode the whole time. I could have taken way more pictures without having to swap to a new memory card. Now, having had time with this camera, I've come to realize that it operates and even feels a lot more like a manual film camera than a point-and-shoot digital camera from the late aughts and tens. That's because you really need to be patient with it to take half-decent photos. For all the elegance of its exterior design, it's a slow, plotting device. Whereas cameras like this Cybershot are designed to make it really easy to squeeze off a bunch of pictures without much ceremony, the Fujifilm demands you compose each shot with more care, especially if you only have low capacity memory cards like I do. Yes, it doesn't carry the same burden as film in that each exposure literally costs money down the line to develop, but each shot takes so long to capture, process, and save, and this sensor is so prone to blurring and sensitive to uneven lighting that you really want to take your time with every frame. It needs to be babied in order to coax out good-looking photos. It does best in rooms with soft, even lighting and completely still subjects. If you're patient with it, you can get some decent-looking photos that are almost film-like in their color qualities. The noise and slight smudging just add to that effect. This isn't really the type of camera that you could throw into your bag and take with you on a night out and end up with a handful of amazingly memorable pictures the morning after. You won't get those good, bad-looking Y2K era photos like this one would take. You'd probably be lucky to end up with even a single decipherable shot the next day, unless your goal was to take extremely streaky, blurry images at the club to make some kind of abstract art. All of this to say, if you're interested in getting yourself an older digital camera, I would suggest something a little more modern than this. In that sense, but to a lesser degree, this camera suffers from the same problems as the Dynacam Mark I from years prior. Unless you were the type of person who took pictures all the time, who could really take advantage of having a large memory card, and most importantly, actually owned a home computer or otherwise had access to one to process the images with, it just wasn't a really attractive option as far as cameras went. Its performance, even under ideal conditions, doesn't meet that of even a low-end point-and-shoot film camera from the same time. I guess nowadays, the same question could be asked of cameras like these. Why would you want them? 2010's point and shoot cameras are not as performant or fast or convenient or even as much camera as modern smartphones. Literally, the back face of a big iPhone rocks a whole 0.024057778 cameras per square centimeter, while the front of this Cybershot only has 0.02222222222 cameras per square centimeter. I've heard that's the deal breaker for a lot of folks. But the quality of the photos is not why people buy vintage digital cameras. A lot of the drawbacks that these cameras have are actually what make people seek them out. The occasional flatness in bright images and the shadowiness in dark ones harken back to an age when digital photography was becoming increasingly cheap and convenient, when cameras were shrinking down in size while memory formats continued to expand. The concept of being able to snap a ton of photos on a whim was new to most people, and the variants in every shot were all part of every picture we took. Man, even to this day, dedicated cameras are just a lot of fun. Yes, my phone is smaller, has a brighter flash, and features 6 times more megapixels than this camera and 32 times more megapixels than this one. It takes better looking pictures faster and has hundreds of gigabytes to store them in. And yet, for me and many others, there's something about the photos that my phone takes that just don't scratch the same itch, even though it's become the primary camera for most people today. The modern cell phone is a ridiculous everything device. It's a marvel of technological achievement that many of us literally need to live our daily lives, for better or for worse. But the computational photography behind the pictures it takes is always trying to get the algorithmically best looking photo, but in reality, the imperfection is where the humanity gets in. This was deviceworld. Thanks for watching. Okay, if you're hearing this, then you made it to the end of the video. Again, thank you so much for watching. This is my first time making a YouTube video, so I know there were some mic peaking issues. Hopefully that will all be fixed by next time, and I am planning to have another video out before the end of February about super audio CDs, but I might pivot and do something about this really cool point and shoot film camera that I picked up at a thrift store recently. We will see. I can't imagine anyone's gonna see this that I didn't directly send it to, but if you like the video, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. That does help. And yeah, I will see you all next time.